Grandma is buried in the garden.
It had been a week since the mother-in-law went missing. The 4-year-old daughter pointed to a spot in the garden when they visited my in-laws' house and made this claim. Hearing these words, the husband and father-in-law turned pale and began trembling.
That's impossible. It's just a child's nonsense.
However, I was the only one who believed her because I knew the daughter had mysterious powers. Let's dig. When I rushed to the garden and dug up the soil, I found the mother-in-law in a terrible state. And then, terrifying truths began to come to light. I am Summer, a 32-year-old office worker. Our family consists of my husband Niall, who is 5 years older, and our 4-year-old daughter Addison. Niall, who is cheerful and talkative, utilized his sociable nature to become a hairdresser and eventually started his own salon. The father-in-law is the complete opposite of the husband, being strict and stern, but the mother-in-law is very kind. Having lost my own mother at a young age, I adored her like my real mother. The three of us lived happily, and our relationship with the mother-in-law was wonderful. However, there was one concern. I couldn't get along with my father-in-law, and our relationship was strained. He would turn away or ignore me whenever I visited the in-laws' house.
A spoiled girl like you is not suitable for Niall. You should get a divorce.
He even went as far as to suggest divorce. Does he hate me? When I consulted with the mother-in-law, she was shocked and denied it. I'm sorry for making you feel bad. My husband is just unsociable, but he's a kind person at heart. He must have chosen his words poorly. She tried to explain the father-in-law's good points, but I couldn't be convinced because he was cold not only to me but also to the mother-in-law and the husband. He was especially harsh towards Niall, often yelling at him for no reason. Are you okay? That was terrible.
My father has never trusted me.
Even so, the husband didn't argue back and just bit his lip. The mother-in-law would always step in to mediate between them. It's strange that the biological parent and child get along the worst. Actually, the in-laws were both remarried, and Niall was the father's son, so he wasn't biologically related to the mother. They had moved into the mother-in-law's wealthy family's home. I wish they could get along since family members can suddenly disappear. Having lost my mother at a young age, I always felt frustrated. 2 years into our marriage, filled with complex emotions towards the family, our daughter Addison was born. The demands of childcare kept us away from the in-laws' house, which was a 2-hour drive away. I wish we could visit more often so they could see their grandchild. However, when Addison turned 1, my father, who lived alone in his home, fell ill, and I started visiting him for care, which made visiting the in-laws even more difficult. When Addison was 3, despite my efforts, my father passed away. At the funeral 2 days later, the father-in-law attended with a stern expression and said nothing. Even at a time like this, he doesn't say anything. He's really cold. Sensing my distress, the mother-in-law gently comforted me. It's tough, isn't it? We're here for you. The young daughter, not understanding that her beloved grandfather had passed away, looked around the house and talked to herself.
Huh? About Mom? Yeah. That's good.
Addison, who are you talking to?
I can hear Grandpa's voice. He says it's good that the scar on Mom's forehead isn't noticeable anymore.
I was shocked. When I was around 2 years old, I had a bad fall while walking with my father, and a piece of glass had deeply cut my forehead. The scar had become almost unnoticeable as I grew up, which had always made my father happy. But Addison shouldn't have known about this.
It's just a child's words. Addison probably dreamed about it.
The husband didn't take it seriously, but I was convinced that Addison could see my father's presence. Addison must have the ability to understand the words of people who are no longer in this world. Then, about 2 months after the funeral, the mother-in-law came to visit us. "Summer, you have us. Stay strong." And also, she handed me an envelope secretly when Niall wasn't around. "Please take this." Inside the envelope were 3 bundles of $100 bills. I was utterly shocked and confused. "Why are you doing this? I can't accept this." "Huh?" When I tried to return the envelope, the mother-in-law looked puzzled. At that moment, Niall entered the room, and she left without saying anything. When I discussed it with my husband, he turned pale and became worried about his mother.
What's going on? We're not in financial trouble. Did she say anything to you?
She didn't say anything.
I'll ask her directly next time. Don't worry.
Niall reassured me, but I couldn't help but worry. I called the mother-in-law's cell phone multiple times, but it never connected. Maybe she's avoiding me because I refused her offer? But I can't just accept money without knowing why. 3 days later, I mustered up the courage to call the mother-in-law to ask. What I heard was shocking.
She's gone.
What do you mean?
She left a typed note saying "Don't look for me" and disappeared 2 days ago. I've been waiting for her to come back.
No way. According to the father-in-law, she had disappeared the day after she visited us. She must have had a reason for bringing that money. I should have listened to her. I deeply regretted not understanding the situation. When Niall came home, I suggested filing a missing person report, but he stopped me.
Mom must have had enough of Dad. It's probably just a runaway. She'll contact us soon.
Thinking about the cold father-in-law, I agreed with Niall. However, that night, the daughter pointed towards the in-laws' house and said something shocking.
Grandma is calling. She says to go to Grandpa. Let's go, Mom.
What? I couldn't believe my ears, but I quickly remembered the funeral. Addison could talk to the deceased. If she could hear the mother-in-law's voice, then... With a bad feeling, I decided to go to the in-laws' house the next morning.
Hey. Nothing good will come from dealing with my father.
Ignoring my husband's attempts to stop me, I started preparing to leave with the daughter.
Oh, fine. I'm worried about you too, so I'll come too.
It was Saturday, and Niall, who was off work, drove us there. When we arrived, the flowers in the garden's flower bed were withered, indicating that the mother-in-law wasn't there to care for them.
What are you doing here?
The father-in-law appeared at the entrance with a sullen face. We're worried about your wife.
Humph.
At that moment, Addison, who was looking at the garden, suddenly shouted in a panic.
Grandma is buried in the garden. Over there.
That's impossible. It's just a child's nonsense.
The father-in-law turned pale and denied it, but I believed the daughter. Addison had mysterious powers. Let's dig. I ran to the garden, grabbed a shovel left there, and started digging. Soon, the mother-in-law's altered face emerged from the soil. "Oh no! How could you be covered in mud like this?" I was so shocked that I collapsed to my knees. The father-in-law was also pale. Then Niall shouted at the father-in-law. His eyes were wide, eyebrows furrowed, and he looked like a demon.
You did this, didn't you? I didn't. What are you talking about?
The father-in-law denied it frantically, but the husband didn't believe him.
You're the only one who could do something like this. You must have snapped and done it during a fight. I would never do such a thing.
The two began to argue fiercely, and Niall grabbed the father-in-law by the collar and shoved him.
Let's get Mom out of the ground.
Niall took the shovel from me and started digging out the mother-in-law. The father-in-law just stared in shock, still on the ground. At that moment, the daughter pulled my hand and whispered in my ear.
Grandma says to look behind the vanity.
Leaving Niall and the father-in-law, I sneaked into the mother-in-law's room with Addison. There, we found the mother-in-law's diary, revealing shocking truths. So that's what happened. Unforgivable. I clenched the diary tightly and vowed revenge. At that moment, I sensed a figure behind me. Turning around, I saw my father-in-law with a demonic look on his face.
Stay quiet.
He spoke quickly, then dragged my daughter and me, shoving us into the back seat of the car in the garage. He started the car hastily.
Where are you going? Bring back Summer and Addison.
Noticing the engine's sound, my husband, furious, chased us in his own car. Trembling with fear, I held Addison and my mother-in-law's diary tightly. My father-in-law's car turned into a side street ahead but had to stop as it was a dead end. My husband quickly caught up, blocking the road with his car, and got out.
Open the door. You old bastard.
Seeing Niall banging on the driver's side window, my father-in-law, resigned, got out of the car with my daughter and me.
Summer, Addison, are you all right?
My husband tried to pull us into his embrace, but I slapped his arms away forcefully. No. Don't touch me. Holding Addison, I moved behind my father-in-law, who spread his arms, standing protectively in front of us. My husband, looking incredulous.
What's wrong, Summer?
It was you who did it to your mother, wasn't it? Glaring at my husband with contempt, I accused him, and his face turned pale as he started shouting.
What? It was that old man there who did it. You can tell from his tyrannical nature. No. I was strict with you so you wouldn't do any more harm. I spoke to Summer out of concern, but the words just wouldn't come out right.
My father-in-law bowed his head, giving me an apologetic look. At that moment, I understood what my mother-in-law meant when she said my father-in-law was a kind man despite his gruff demeanor. In fact, my father-in-law had revealed Niall's past to me while we were fleeing in the car. My husband had been a regular troublemaker, frequently called to the school and taken in by the police. He would steal money from wallets and shoplift. Even after my father-in-law remarried, he continued to verbally abuse my mother-in-law, telling her that as a stepchild, he couldn't inherit her estate and demanding she adopt him, saying it would be great if she disappeared. How could you say such terrible things to such a kind mother? My voice shook with anger. My father-in-law's harshness towards Niall stemmed from his greedy actions. Furthermore, my husband continued lying to get money even after our marriage. He used me, claiming I had been tricked by an acquaintance into debt and needed money. I can't believe this. What were you thinking? When I yelled, my husband flinched and shrank back. My mother-in-law must have tried to give me a large sum of money out of concern, believing my husband's lies.
I was just a little short on cash. Stop being hysterical and calm down.
How dare you speak to Summer like that? My father-in-law bared his teeth and shouted at Niall, who was making excuses. You hid your faults, spoke ill of me to your parents, and spoke ill of my father to me. That's the lowest of the low.
Ugh.
My husband, teary-eyed, was overwhelmed by our combined accusations. Then, looking like he had an epiphany, he started ranting.
But that doesn't justify me taking her life. Don't accuse me without proof.
The proof is right here. I thrust my mother-in-law's diary at him. According to it, she had consulted my father-in-law and decided to leave all her inheritance to her granddaughter, Addison, through a will deposited with a lawyer. However, Niall unexpectedly found a hidden copy of the will and demanded the real one, making her fear for her safety.
That's a lie. It's just the ramblings of an old woman. Besides, a diary isn't proof.
As my husband smugly dismissed it, Addison suddenly staggered, her face turning terrifyingly different as she shouted in a low voice.
I won't get the inheritance because I'm not her biological child. I'm furious. I'll send you to the other side.
Hearing this, Niall's eyes widened, and he collapsed to his knees, trembling.
How does Addison know my last conversation with Mother? Can you really talk to the dead? Is Mother here?
Addison, rolling her eyes back, nodded with her head lolling. A warm wind blew, ruffling Niall's hair as if being patted.
Stop it, Mother.
Turning pale, my husband began to cry and made a shocking confession.
I wanted money. I had an affair with a married woman I met at my salon and had to pay compensation. I also harassed a new hairstylist and had to pay more compensation. It's terrible.
What? You did that? The terrible one is you scumbag. Hearing my husband's misdeeds, my father-in-law beside me held his head in his hands, shocked by his fears coming true.
I thought the inheritance would cover the debts I incurred from the compensations, but she left it all to Addison.
Niall ground his teeth in frustration.
Did you see your mother as just a wallet? No wonder she decided to leave you nothing.
My father-in-law shouted, veins bulging on his temples, and finally, Niall confessed out of defiance.
Yes, so I got rid of her.
Everyone fell silent at his horrifying words. It was you, after all.
No. That's not.
Having blurted out the truth, Niall panicked.
I'm her son, so I'm entitled to the inheritance. After 7 years of her disappearance, everything would have gone to my father and eventually to me, so I took a knife.
Suddenly, a strong wind blew from behind Addison.
I always believed in you, always. Always.
Addison, eyes rolled back, raised her hand, causing a whirlwind to form around my husband, assaulting him with a warm, stormy air.
I'm sorry, Mother. Forgive me.
Niall, covering his head, curled up on the ground, tears and drool dripping as he begged for forgiveness from my mother-in-law. My father-in-law, seeing his son in such a state, bowed his head deeply. The wind stopped, and Addison's expression returned to normal. Hugging my exhausted daughter, I told my husband, It's too late for apologies. Your mother's life can't be restored. Tell the police everything honestly.
Please. If it gets out that I killed mother, I'll never get out of prison. Keep it a secret. We're husband and wife.
Your mother was more like a real parent to me than you ever were. I will never forgive you. When I coldly declared this, his shoulders slumped. Later, I submitted the recorded conversation with my husband to the police as evidence. He was found guilty and imprisoned. I divorced Niall and demanded $20,000 in compensation for emotional distress and $100,000 in child support. Even if he gets out, he'll face a lonely life of paying off his debts. Now, I've come to appreciate my father-in-law's kindness and we continue to keep in touch. My mother-in-law's inheritance, as stated in her will be kept for my daughter's future. As Addison grows, her mysterious powers are fading, and that's fine by me. For my daughter's bright future, I plan to live positively and happily. How did you like this story? Please subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.